Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I've got on the screen there Tinashe Jonas. His video has been taking the rounds in my social media. It's interesting how Zimbabweans are passionate about the untenable situation in the country. Let's just listen to him.
Zimbabweans are suffering. A few circle called Venevayo is enjoying life. Who is Venevayo? ED, Auxilia Mnangagwa, ED Siranas, Chivayo, Tagwirei, DCK, and Scott Sakupanya, and others. More than 90% of Zimbabweans who are suffering are not in the Venevayo, they are in the Varandavayo. Operation Buda Musaga, Puma Esakeni. We are in the SEC, Tirimusaga, Reuranda, Tirimusaga, Rokutambura, nyika ichibirwa minerals. Operation Buda Musaga, ndeyokuti ngati taure zvirikuitika munyika. Let's fight corruption, let's fight dictatorship, let's fight monopoly, state capture by the Mnangagwa family, supported by Isaac Moyo, the Director General of Central Intelligence Organization, CIO.
What he's saying is true, and I think many people would not dispute it. But I think what he should have asked is Zimbabwe's economic meltdown the result of Mnangagwa and his cronies? In other words, is this the result of the last 7 years of the so-called Second Republic? The answer to that has got to be no. Zimbabwe has been on this economic decline for the last 44 years. I think the question, therefore, one has got to ask is, why is it that 44 years after independence, we are still stuck with a Zanu PF dictatorship? A parallel question would be, in the last 44 years, are we saying we never had the opportunity to end the Zanu PF dictatorship? An honest answer to that is, yes, we did. We did have many opportunities to end the Zanu PF dictatorship. The best opportunity was during the 2008 to 2013 GNU. What happened? Well, we wasted it. If we get a golden opportunity and waste it, there's no point in pretending that we need another golden opportunity when we have not learned why we wasted the last one. Indeed, getting another golden opportunity to end the Zanu PF dictatorship now will again be wasted because we are not capable of seeing the opportunity. It is absolutely disappointing that even now, what, 20 years since the GNU, many people out there still have no clue what the GNU was about. It was the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms to end the Zanu PF dictatorship. You have got to understand that first. Operation Ulam Saga and all these other calls will be meaningless unless you have learned why you have failed to bring about any meaningful change in the last 44 years. Zanu PF has rigged elections for the last 44 years. Zanu PF blatantly rigged last year's elections because no meaningful democratic reforms had been implemented. In the late 1990s, one had hoped that the people of Zimbabwe have learned something, because that was when the collective outcry was, we want democratic change. And to put it bluntly, the democratic change people were crying for was that we implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. And so for the last 24 years, since the emergence of MDC, the people of Zimbabwe have risked livelihoods, limbs, and lives. Over 500 people died during the 2008 elections alone. To elect the MDC Triple C leaders into power for the primary purpose of implementing the democratic reforms. 24 years down the line, including 5 in the GNU, not even one token reform has been implemented. The people themselves have got to realize, to look back and say, wait a minute, this is not working. Why is it not working? And correct it. To keep on clamoring that we want to end this Zanu PF dictatorship, when you have been given the chance to do so and you waste it, it's not going to change anything. We are not learning from the past. Last year was another chance, not as good as the GNU one, but it was still nonetheless a chance to end the Zanu PF dictatorship. All we had to do then was stop participating in flawed elections to give the Zanu PF legitimacy. God knows the number of people who have explained that point. That you're participating, if you participate in a flawed election, you only give Zanu PF legitimacy. Past experience has shown it. Since 2013, it has been clear that the process, the electoral process in Zimbabwe is so flawed, it really is meaningless participating. I've quoted here people like Tinashe making the same admission, emphasizing the sheer futility of participating in flawed elections. David Coulthard explained why the opposition have continued to participate in these flawed elections, even when they themselves realized this was a flawed process. As he admits there in his book. The 2013 electoral process was so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step was to withdraw. But he could not withdraw. Neither could his colleagues withdraw. Why? He explains it. The two sides did not trust that the other side, if they withdraw, they would do the same. And so they ended up, both of them, participating. Because they also knew Zanu PF was giving away a few gravitating seats to those who participate. And so we've been stuck in this situation where the opposition are participating in a flawed electoral process, knowing fully well that it is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they will give the process credibility, as David Coulter put it in this quotation, and thus gives Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate the suffering. But they've continued to do so out of greed. The greed was so blatant that last year, for instance, Chamisa was prepared to lie to the people of Zimbabwe that he had plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes just to get the people of Zimbabwe to participate in the flawed electoral process. Absolutely amazing. What is even worse is that the people themselves believed it. And not just a few hundred or a few thousand. Millions believed it. Nearly 2 million Zimbabweans participated in the flawed elections last year to vote for Chamisa. And one can estimate that 3 to 4 million, at least in the diaspora, supported it, because the media was full of people encouraging people to participate in those elections. These are the people, most of those in the diaspora, who have got university qualifications, professionals in their own right, and yet they didn't have the intellect to realize that Chamisa was lying. Chamisa had not plugged any vote-rigging loophole. Oh, how could you say you've plugged the vote-rigging loopholes when we still had the voters' roll that had not been verified? Indeed, Chamisa did not even have the common sense to deploy election agencies at all the polling stations, even though he had received the funding for it. He pocketed the money that should have gone to pay the election agencies deployed at the polling stations. What I find amazing is that there are still Zimbabweans out there who still do not believe that Chamisa lied. Here is Chamisa being cornered by BBC, and still he stubbornly refused to admit that he had lied.
Ende patakasangana na Trump akatibvunza navakomana, mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari?
Serious questions were raised about your behaviour in Washington, D.C. You did see some senior people on Capitol Hill, some Congress people, but you also claimed that you'd seen Donald Trump. You claimed you had a conversation with him in which you said he asked you how much you needed to move the country forward. You told him $15 billion, and he said to you that he would provide the money if you won the election. That was not true, was it?
sangana na Trump akatibvunza navakomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
It was not true that you'd seen Donald Trump and that Donald Trump indicated to you that he would provide, if you won the election, $15 billion.
All those statements were said by other people, not what I said.
Akasangana na Trump akatibvunza navakomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Well, no, because there is a video which shows you at a rally in January back home in Zimbabwe saying that Donald Trump had pretty much promised you $15 billion. To be clear, because some people in Zimbabwe are still confused, you're now telling me you did not meet Donald Trump.
We did not.
What matters here is that Chamisa lied last year about plugging the vote rigging loopholes. He knew he was lying. Chamisa and company participated in those flawed elections out of greed. That is the truth. And yet, many people out there, and judging from last year's elections, millions of Zimbabweans still want to believe Chamisa. The tragedy here is, as much as people like Tinashe are passionate about how we should escape or end the Zanu PF dictatorship, as long as we have got millions of ordinary Zimbabweans who are so ignorant and naive and gullible, they will believe anything they're told by somebody with a track record of being corrupt, incompetent, and a liar like Chamisa. Zimbabwe is not getting out of this mess. We are not getting out of the bag. Because right now, I can rest assure you, Nelson Chamisa is preparing for his comeback with his blue train, or whatever color it's going to be this time. And he will tell the Zimbabweans that the blue train is going to win big. He has plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. Hashtag God is in it. And the people will believe him. And as long as people participate in these flawed elections in their millions, like it or not, SADC will find it very difficult to deny the Zanu PF political legitimacy. Zanu PF knows that. Zanu PF, all the looting that Tinashe is talking about there is absolutely right. Zanu PF is using some of that wealth to corrupt the state institutions like the police, the army, the ZEC, the judiciary, and the opposition. We should not be surprised that the opposition will be hell-bent on participating in 2028 elections without even a token reform implemented. If we really want to break away to end the Zanu PF dictatorship, we should be smart enough to realize that participating in flawed elections only to give Zanu PF political legitimacy is foolish. Why we keep on believing a blatant lie from somebody like Chamisa to corner us into participating beggars belief. It is a common saying that nations get the government they deserve. I think if we were going to be honest with ourselves, we deserve this Zanu PF corrupt, incompetent, tyrannical dictatorship, complete with its MDC triple C sidekick that is equally corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless. We have been so ignorant and naive to keep being conned into participating in flawed elections to perpetuate the dictatorship. If we can't understand that, we do not deserve anything else. So to my friend Tinashe Jonas, I think you're backing up the wrong tree. It is not that people are not aware that they're suffering under the dictatorship. There's been a long time suffering. The question is, why have we failed to bring about meaningful change? That is the question we should be asking. After 44 years, the last 24 of which we had, at least we thought so, an opposition whose primary task was to implement reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. And yet nothing has happened. I think it is before we start confronting Zanu PF, we should first look at why we have failed to bring about change for the last 44 years. We should see our own failings, our own inadequacies, our own weaknesses, and put those right first before we go out there and Zanu PF again. The solution is not that we have not realized that we are oppressed. The problem is we have been backing up the wrong tree. We've entrusted change to people who, when they had the golden opportunity to bring about those change, they failed to implement even one reform. They sold out. And alas, even 24 years later, including the 5 in the GNU, we still put our trust in the same corrupt, incompetent, and lying opposition. We do not even have the guts to admit to ourselves that they are corrupt, incompetent, and lying. We have a problem here, and the problem is us. Thank you very much for joining me today, and have a good day.